Welcome to you all for joining us. Thank you very much. Now, as I was saying, my name is Peg Alexander. I'm a journalist and broadcaster, and I'm the person who's been brought in to host this seminar and the Road Ahead podcast, which we will tell you more about. First up, we're going to set the context and approach. We're going to talk about what we can expect for the first 100 days of this new government, and also get a feel of where they're coming from. What is the approach? What are their priorities? So I am delighted to be joined by Make UK's Chief Operating Officer, Ben Fletcher. Hello, Ben.
Good morning, Peg.
Morning. And also we have Make UK's Chief Economist, Seamus Nevin. Hello, Seamus.
Good morning, Peg, and good morning, all the listeners.
Brilliant. Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you both here. We've already had a conversation on podcast, which we will say more about later on, about what we think will be the priorities for this government. But I just want to start with the King's speech. Of course, yesterday we had the King's speech. This morning or yesterday, your Chief Executive, Stephen Phipson, said of the King's speech that the inclusion of industrial strategy was essential. He went on to say that having a strategy that addresses the skills crisis, takes advantage of rapidly accelerating technologies, is absolutely essential for the manufacturing industry. So, Ben, let me come to you first then. How essential do you think this industrial strategy is going to be?
I think it's going to be absolutely critical. And I think sometimes people quite rightly kind of question why we attach importance to things like government strategies. And I think it's fair to say, after an almost 30-year career in this type of world, there's a fair number of government strategies that have served not much more purpose than propping up doors and acting as table weights. Why this is different, why people should think this is so important, is for two reasons. Firstly, there are a really significant number of challenges facing the manufacturing sector, and what we need is a joined-up government response to them and a joined-up government story. And I think what the industrial strategy will give us is something that cuts across the Department for Business, the Department for Education, the Treasury in terms of finance, and in particular, now that the Department for Business is linked to the Department for Trade, a real kind of cut across into the export world as well, which is so important for the manufacturing sector. So I think in and of itself, that will really help address some of the absolutely generational issues that the manufacturing world has got to get its head around over the next few years, which including the biggest technological change that we've seen in over 100 years, the reversing the massive decline in the number of apprenticeships that we've seen in recent years, and the hemorrhaging of skills from our sector. I think it's also important for more than just what it does in government. It's important as a really critical sign. The things that we hear from our members increasingly is that things like investment have been put on hold for sometimes months, sometimes longer than that, because they're not sure what the government is planning to do. The political climate in the UK has been confused and mixed in recent months and recent years. And I think equally from a government perspective, one of the really clear messages that we're hearing from the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, is that they believe that there is a vast quantity of investment, both domestic and foreign, that could be unleashed if we could give those investors more confidence that the UK and UK manufacturing is the right place to invest at the moment. So I think the importance is across both of these things. I mean, look, I did a member visit on election day by coincidence, just one visit. There were tens of millions of pounds that they were waiting to invest, and they were unable to do so because they were unclear what government policy was in relation to the products that they were making. And I think if that is just a random example of a very important firm, a very prestigious firm, who are sitting there saying, we just need some certainty that the regulations are going to be related to this, that government is actually going to commit to these targets, and then we can unlock millions of pounds worth of investment. If that is in any way representative, and I genuinely believe it is, I think the new government could well be onto something.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. Seamus, let's keep on that topic of investment there as we kind of keep talking about it, because they have, though, committed to the previous government's spending plans, haven't we? So what can we expect in terms of investment for the manufacturing industry or investment? And one of the questions that came in was about long-term strategic investments in other things like public infrastructure, etc.
Yeah, so I think going back to the kind of final point that Ben made around the signal that they're trying to send here, we know that this government has come in a fiscally constrained environment. They've also committed to a spending regime that gives them very little leeway to increase public spending in the traditional ways that a Labour government might normally be expected to do. So part of their approach will be, I think, offering a compact to business. So they're very clear about setting a stable policy environment, giving businesses that confidence to invest, giving the markets the confidence to ensure stability so that interest rates, inflation, the pound remains stable, and we have a much more clear medium-term future for the economy. But the other side of this is trying to set an environment that enables businesses themselves to finally enact those decisions that, as Ben said earlier, they have been putting on ice for some time. So they will be doing a lot of different initiatives. We saw 40 different bills proposed in the King's Speech yesterday. There's a very ambitious programme for government for their first year. But I think they're also making clear that they are offering a compact. We will do the unpopular things about tackling NIMBYism, so building houses, changing planning rules to enable factories to be expanded, that sort of thing, investing in infrastructure, all the rest. But the quid pro quo is we want you to make those investments in your own businesses, to start going really gung-ho for growth and creating good, high-paying jobs, the kinds of jobs that the manufacturing sector provides a great amount of already.
Because that's really important part of their approach, isn't it? That what they're saying is that they will make investments and they will encourage investment by the private sector, by employers, by other people as well, so that it's kind of matched the investment that they will be making in areas such as housing and the industrial strategy.
Yeah, and you see that with the National Wealth Fund. So it's not quite a sovereign wealth fund in the traditional sense that you might see with Norway, where the state owns a certain proportion of businesses and reinvests a surplus in the tax take into that, and it's essentially a national bank account. This is more about setting a signal so that the state will invest in whatever it may be, GB Energy, Great British Railways, other initiatives. And they want to use that as a way to provide confidence to market and crowd in private sector investment as well, because really they need the private sector to get that growth going. They're, as we said, limited. They've committed not to raising any of the employment taxes on workers, because they recognise that there has been a cost of living crisis, and there are a lot of Labour voters and ordinary workers who feel that squeeze in their pocket. So they're not going to raise those those taxes on workers, and the traditional levers of revenue raising cannot be availed of, and therefore they need to create that stable environment that encourages financial institutions, banks, businesses to make those investment decisions, to start spending and going for growth.
What does this mean, Ben, for individual companies and individual manufacturers? Because you started off by saying, this is a cross-government approach. This strategy will impact on all the government departments. And I think when we did the podcast, you said it was probably easier to say which government departments it wouldn't impact on rather than which it will. So we've got this big strategy, these big visions. What does this actually mean for individual employers, individual companies?
So I think one of the ways to bring this to life would be through the issue of skills. Conscious of the members on the call, for years now, even through the absolutely toughest moments of Brexit and the toughest moments of COVID, when we survey our members, the skills shortage was the issue that was always number one for them, even at those really, really difficult times. And I think one of the things the industrial strategy will start to do that will have a tangible difference to companies around the country, big and small, is that if they get it right, and we're still to see the details, so we're not going to declare victory too early, but what an industrial strategy has the capacity to do is to do two things. Firstly, to direct the money where it's needed most. And in our sector, the really big issue is the number of private training providers that have exited the market, and the number of FE colleges and state-provided trainers who haven't got the money to invest in the kit to deliver the training. So one of the things could really help would be getting that money from the levy and elsewhere directed into capital expenditure, and for local authorities and private providers to have the confidence to know that they can run these courses and make a profit.
We will be talking about the levy later on, because there was mention.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to get into too much detail and steal my colleague's thunder, but it's a critical part of all of this. What that will mean for local firms, we hope, is that through local authorities and in areas of the country that have metro mayors, government is increasingly encouraging the political tiers to work with business much more closely to develop local plans. So as well as the benefit that you should receive in terms of having easier access and better access to skills training, a faster route for taking on apprentices, there will also be both an opportunity and a challenge, which is to get involved in the delivery and the formulation of those local plans. Because one of the really big issues is we're not going to get to a world where every college can offer every single apprenticeship in every kind of technology. What we need to do is within a region, within an area, to make sure that there is someone doing that, so that there's a suitable degree of understanding of what the need is from businesses, so that the demand and the supply can meet up. And one of the things that I think local firms will both benefit from, but also will be asked to contribute to, is forming those local plans, so that there is a much clearer picture of what the demand is, so that the supply can be much more tailored to that local demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something else we talk about a lot on the podcast, the importance that there's going to be in future of being part of those local processes and getting your voice heard. And Seamus, at the other end of the scale, we know one of the concerns that came through in pre-questions was about whether the industrial strategy will help anything in terms of border friction with the EU, and also in terms of people who are trading with the EU. Was there anything yesterday in the King's speech? What are you thinking around that with the new government?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question, because it's quite clear, if you look at the kind of rhetoric that was coming out of the Labour Party during the election campaign, that we're keen to avoid talking too much about Europe just because of concerns that the party has been branded with sort of wanting to return to EU membership. They've made it absolutely clear they're ruling out the customs union, they're ruling out the single market, they're ruling out a return to freedom of movement, but they are also ruling in taking pragmatic steps in the national interest to reduce those frictions that have been placed on businesses in recent years. And I think one of the things that maybe went under the radar yesterday was a commitment to aligning where it's sensible for us to do so with EU regulations going forward, not only just because it'll reduce the friction that exporters from the UK are facing when trying to export to the European market, but also because it will reduce internal UK friction that has been created because of the so-called Irish Sea border.
So you're very much welcoming that then?
Well, I think most businesses will recognize that anything that reduces the paperwork and the bureaucracy that has placed extra costs and time constraints on their ability to export. But this is a long process, and it's a quid pro quo. They're taking pragmatic steps unilaterally, and they're trying to rebuild relations with the EU to improve trade and improve UK exports. But they're very pragmatic steps. This isn't going to mark a massive step change, but it is an incremental improvement, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can I just jump in very quickly, because I think there's one additional point to that superb summary. Labour are very clear that part of their strategy for unlocking investment, where we started this chat, comes from displaying the UK as now the calm place to do business. And one of the big changes will be, how can we get a better relationship with the EU along the kind of terms that Seamus has just set out? But it's also part of international signalling that, in comparison to France, which has got some very significant political challenges, in comparison to Germany, which is probably a few months behind and will probably have a change of government in their next election, the incredibly febrile environment in the States, in terms of unlocking that foreign investment, presenting Britain as a country that has improved and is committed to improving even further its trading relationships with Europe, and also is now a place with 5-year political certainty, a clear strategy, and a strong place to do business. That will be a huge part, and is already a very clear part of their ambitions for unlocking international investment. We're now back open for business, and we're actually, having had a period of uncertainty, we're now the calm and stable environment among the big Western powers.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. I'm just looking at some of the questions that have come in while we've been on here. We only have a few minutes left. I mean, it's interesting. Sharon picked up the point about the local plans, saying that they've already got some excellent awareness in Greater Manchester. Will this continue? I think what's going to be different here is actually it's going to be more of that, and the public finance investments are going to be much more targeted towards some of those local plans. We've also got a question about employment law, which we'll cover in the next session of this event, if that's all right. Very quick question that we've got here as well, following on the discussion there about Europe. This is from Adrian. Will closer alignment to the EU mean a move towards a customs union membership or joining the EFTA? Seamus, I mean, you were saying that customs union definitely not back on the table.
No, Labour have ruled that out. I think, going back to that point around stability and the UK being the calm place to do business, they don't want to reopen old wounds. We've had a very fractious debate in this country for the last number of years. They will take pragmatic steps to reduce, bureaucracy that businesses face. But I think something like the customs union is something that they've clearly ruled out.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. You both, I know, have been talking to the now government for quite a long time. You've been talking to them whilst they've been in opposition, and that's certainly one of the things that lots of people have said, is the fact that generally the same people who are in the shadow positions as now are in government has been very useful for particularly organisations like yourselves, people who provide a voice to keep talking to them. The door is open at the moment. So Sharon just was asking, about ideas you've got to inspire government whilst they've got open ears. Is there anything that wasn't in the King's speech yesterday, or that you haven't heard would go in the industrial strategy that if you got a chance, you'd be saying, come on, add this in?
I think it's not a specific thing. I was at an event last week speaking on a panel and made this point then. One of the things that I think that's really important, particularly for exports, and the government has not talked enough about it yet, although I think from the previous several years of discussion they get it, is that Made in Britain is a hugely powerful brand. We devalue it in the UK, sadly, but actually in the export markets that we serve, something that comes from a British factory is really highly regarded. It's known to be of very high quality. It's known to be absolutely on spec and what people requested. It doesn't have to come back to be remade and retooled. There is a huge advantage in that, and I think one of the things we should be thinking about once we've addressed some of the domestic issues in the industrial strategy is how we can use our hallmark, our reputation, to grow even better and bigger export markets. And I hope that when Labour have got through some of the really big challenging issues that they absolutely have to address in government, we can think really hard about what that export market looks like, how that push can be delivered, and how we can all get excited about British manufactured goods being sold around the world again.
If I can just add to that.
Yeah, please do, Seamus. You've got 30 seconds. What's on your wish list?
The manufacturing sector is only 10% of the UK economy, but we contribute about half of all of our exports. And this government has set a very ambitious target that by the end of their term in office in the next 4 or 5 years, the UK will have the highest sustained growth of any economy in the G7 list of the world's biggest economies. The only way to do that is to increase the number of exports that we have, provide more of the kinds of things that international customers are looking to buy, and manufacturing will absolutely be at the heart of that. And it's very clear from even their early days in government that they recognise that. So our sector.
You said Rachel Reeves, she's on board with you on that.
Yeah, I think absolutely they recognise the importance and the value of the UK manufacturing sector and what it can contribute to their ambitions to grow the economy and provide high-paying quality jobs.
If there is one big change in tone between where we were and where we are now, it's understanding how important our sector is, and that you can't get the kind of growth that the government is seeking without growing our sector. And I think that's a very refreshing tone to all the conversations we're having at the very highest levels of government.
Great place to end. Ben Fletcher, COO of Mate UK, Seamus Nevin, the Chief Economist. Thanks ever so much for joining us here on this live stream. Now, of course, we have got the podcast. We'll be sending out details of the podcast to everyone here who is on the live stream, so you will get that. And we talk about these issues in a bit more detail, don't we, on the podcast? So please do have a listen to that as well. Now, we have got 3 other sessions coming up on this Road Ahead event this morning. Coming up next in about 3 minutes time, we're going to be talking about employment law and health and safety. I know there are some very specific questions. We've already had one in on employment law. So we're just going to have a quick break until 25 past. Then we will come back to talk about employment law, health and safety. Seamus and Ben, thank you both very much. Hello everyone, welcome into this event. If you've just joined us, some of you probably were just with us listening to Ben and Seamus. If you were, I'm sure you've got all sorts going through your head, lots of questions, lots of thoughts, lots of ideas. But welcome if you've just joined us for this session. Now this is the Road Ahead live stream, and in this session we're going to be talking specifically about the proposals around employment law and health and safety. It's going to be an absolutely packed 20 minutes. I'm just warning you. We are going to get nowhere near all the things we need to discuss in 20 minutes, because this is probably one of the areas where we've got the most specific proposals come forward. So welcome everyone. My name is Peg Alexander. I'm a journalist and broadcaster. I'm the host of the Road Ahead podcast and this event. We're joined by Lucy Atherton. Hello, Lucy.
Good morning, Peg.
Morning, Lucy. You're the legal compliance lead. You're the woman who can tell us all about what this new law is going to be around employment law.
That's the plan. Yes, we've got a lot to digest in the coming months and years ahead. The King's Speech yesterday obviously announced a couple of employment-related bills and has trailed the Employment Rights Bill as bringing about the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. So that gives us an indication of what's coming down the line. For certainly anybody in the audience who's an HR practitioner, you are going to have a huge to-do list.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy time. Let me just introduce Chris as well. Chris, hello, Chris. We've got you here as well. You're the health and the Environment, Health and Safety Director. There are potentially changes coming down the line in health and safety, maybe not quite as clear as some of the ones that we know around employment law. But so we're going to kick off on the employment law. I'm sorry, Chris, are you all right just sitting there for a bit?
Of course, yeah.
While we do this. Lucy, you were saying there, you know, the biggest, arguably the biggest change to employment rights in a generation. We've already had one question in asking about, you know, what are going to be the changes, particularly this question of employment rights from day one. King's Speech yesterday, what do you think are the biggest proposals that were in that will affect manufacturers and employers?
So there's a whole raft of employment law reform coming, but I think if we focus on what was in the Employment Rights Bill, then we can pick out maybe a handful of key proposals that are perhaps going to hit the statute books or impact HR more quickly than other areas that we've seen in the manifesto and earlier on. Probably half a dozen. I'll trot through them really quickly. So there's the banning of exploitative 0 hours contracts, and that's designed to ensure that jobs have a level of security and predictability. So employers using those will need to revise and understand how they need to have that flexibility. Ending of hire and refire, that's had a bad press recently, so it's no surprises that that's going to be a regime that's going to be tackled. Perhaps the most significant and headline grabbing ones are the kind of introduction of day one rights. There's sick pay from day one, parental leave from day one, but perhaps the big one is the scrapping of the qualifying period of service for basic unfair dismissal rights. So unfair dismissal will become a day one right, and that's going to be introduced via the Employment Rights Bill. And so that will probably have a significant impact on most of the HR audience listening here, because they're so used to having a qualifying period, a period in which you can assess a worker's capability and suitability for the function and the role that you've recruited them for. Now that's not going to be available to you in the same way. There is a suggestion that there's going to be an exemption or a concession around the probationary period of a new hire, whereby the rules may be slightly different. We don't know the detail of that yet, but it does suggest that understanding and working sensibly with probationary periods for new hires is going to become critical, because any unlawful action by an employer from day one could result in an opportunity for an individual to bring an unfair dismissal claim, whereas right now they won't. So I think that's a big one that will change, will impact quite a lot of HR current practices.
When can we see, have we got any sense of timescale of when any of this
Bring out my crystal
might
ball.
become more?
That's a really difficult one to answer, actually, because the whole range of employment law reform proposals that have been trailed in the New Deal and Manifesto and now the King's Speech all slightly depend on the way in which they're going to be introduced. The reforms in the Employment Rights Bill will follow a parliamentary process, and the Employment Rights Bill is being promised within the first 100 days of the Labour government. So could be Monday morning, could be middle of October, but that will follow a parliamentary process. So that will take some time, and one imagines it will be 12 months possibly, and once it hits the statute books there will be an implementation period. So the proposals enshrined in the Employment Rights Bill will probably take some time to hit as in practice. And of course the Labour government has consistently said throughout the pre-election period and recently that it will be consulting extensively and comprehensively with businesses. So whatever the time frame they have in mind for the employment law reforms that they have on their big to-do list, will need some consultation with business. Some things can be introduced more quickly if it's going to be a regulation that can happen more quickly, whereas the Employment Rights Bill is more of a prolonged parliamentary process. But underlying all of this will be consultation with business, and we hope comprehensive and thoughtful consultation with
And
business.
obviously, you hope that consultation will result in some changes to the proposals and that. But I think, that's not to say that people shouldn't start planning for this. They've got a very big majority. They will be able to get this legislation through.
Yes.
A lot of those things, now is the time really to start thinking about what that means for your contracts, for your management systems, for your HR processes.
Exactly. Although we don't have the detail of the nitty-gritty, as it were, of the reforms, we know what's planned. So we know that unfair dismissal will be a day one right. So now as an HR practitioner that you need to think about your probationary period, and you think about your kind of perhaps upskilling your line managers again to manage performance management. You may need to review your contracts to see whether you have probationary periods in there. As changes to SSP will become a day one right. So you may need to do some modelling as to what the impact on the bottom line is there, and whether you need to change any of your absence management procedures. So there are lots that employers can be doing now to prepare, even in the absence of the nitty-gritty. And I think the listeners will probably have access to this, and if you don't, it's on our website. What we've produced is what we call an HR planning tool. So what we've tried to do is identify the key proposals, kind of identify them and outline the main thrust of it, and then explain what HR managers can be doing now to prepare. For example, there is a proposal if you're a large employer to require ethnicity and disability pay reporting. So taking steps now to understand what data you have around ethnicity and diversity in your workplace, and seeing if you can establish the parameters of any pay gaps now would be a worthwhile step, even though it may be some time before that reporting is mandatory. So that tool that we've got on our website really sets through the sensible steps employers could think about doing now in advance of the legislation actually hitting the statute books.
And then we've had some questions in, and some people kind of saying concerns there about that. So I think, as you were saying, looking now at what probationary periods means, what that means within your organisation about training and management, all of that, there's going to be time to prepare. Chris, I just want to bring you in on this. I know this isn't a specific health and safety question, but one of the things as well that is different, which impacts quite a lot in health and safety, but is that they want to see a lot more formalised, is maybe the wrong word, but those processes for conversations with trade unions, employee structures, employees, etc. They want to see that improve, don't they?
Absolutely. And if we look at legislation, in fact, that's already something that is in legislation, certainly in EHS legislation, it's already there. in our experience, that is done well in some organisations and not in others. So you're right what you say, that's a big drive for the new government. So I think that'll be driven more. I don't think legislation will change. As I say, it's already there, but it will be pushed more. Guidance might be improved. But yeah, that is certainly in the field of EHS and I guess everywhere really. That is something that's really important.
Yeah, and that will come through. We'll come back, as I say, to EHS specifically in a sec.
Yeah.
Just one question, Lucy, that has come up that I think is kind of quite interesting, because probably a lot of people will be thinking this. This is what the question says: how do you get rid of a new hire who is proving detrimental quite early on, and maybe even goes off sick after a few days and uses this legislation to their advantage? I mean, you can't get into the specifics of it, but what would be your general message at this moment around that?
I think the message is, at the moment, good employer practice, good HR practices, fair procedure, fair reason for dismissal. And that was going to be very relevant from day one. The removal of the qualifying period doesn't really change the good HR practice underlying all of this. It just means that a disgruntled employee will have an opportunity to bring a claim to the employment tribunal, whereas previously they wouldn't have. So in terms of the best practice, you will still be in a position to dismiss employees from day one in the same way you can dismiss employees in year 3. It's about understanding whether you have a fair reason for dismissal, following a fair procedure. And that's going to be even more important because the employer doesn't have the protection in that first few years. So I think with probationary periods, sometimes employers just let those slip. They're not that critical in managing the relationship in those early days. It's going to become critical. There may well be some wiggle room for exiting at the end of a probationary period that's proven not successful. We'll see the detail. But the key thing for the employers is managing that relationship, understanding why the performance the individual is not performing well. Is it they haven't had the right training, not the right supervision or leadership, and just doing a really good job of managing your workforce from the start, as most employers probably do anyway. So it might not be too much of a worry. It's just perhaps be more robust in your procedures and upskill your line managers to be confident to manage individuals.
And my guess is during the consultation period, there will be a lot of people talking about what the probationary system could look like and what could go in it for that. Chris, let's move on to talk about environment, health and safety. There are potentially a couple of big changes proposed, aren't there, on this?
Absolutely, yeah. I think with the Employment Rights Bill yesterday that was further clarified yesterday, the chances, as I've said before, about the 1974 Act changing are somewhere near zero, because it's been in place for 50 years and it's good and all those things. I think that the significant changes that were again repeated yesterday was this piece about a single enforcement agency. So so everyone fully understands the significance of that the talk of the government now during the election period was bringing everything together. So HSE, OPSS, all the enforcement bodies into one single agency. That is a very significant undertaking, which will take a lot.
Will that cover the industrial tribunals as well? Will there be the enforcement agency will be on employment rights as well? Because the wording for that is to strengthen enforcement of workplace rights.
Yeah, it's unclear, but it's what they're saying is single enforcement agency to cover everything. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the meaning. Yeah. So that's really significant. And what that could, and that's again another big word, could mean is a review and a reform. It could mean looking at things like fee for intervention, which is the HSE's ability to charge you for their time when they investigate things. It could mean review of that. But what it will mean, according to what the current government have promised, is a change to the ability to bring civil claims. So what they've said in all their election documents, manifestos, etc., is that they will give the HSE, or whichever enforcement body it is, the right to bring civil claims on behalf of employees. So they don't have that right at the moment. It's employees only that can bring civil claims. In the new way of thinking, it will be the enforcement agency. And I just think that's another thing that's gone under the radar that is incredibly significant, because we could get to a point, perhaps, like it was 6-7 years ago, that if a company is guilty in effectively a criminal court, a case prosecuted by the HSE, then they could also automatically be guilty in the civil court. So that is very, very significant and not how it is today.
Yeah, but as you say, this is a could at this stage, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely, yeah, and it's a long, even if it does happen, Peg, it's a long way off, because as Lucy touched on, there's a lot of things that have got to happen for that to come to fruition.
Yeah. I think that the concept of well-being of your workforce is very strong from this government. What they're saying, very much so. This, if anybody watched Ben and Seamus earlier, we were talking about how they want to use public investment to achieve a number of their strategic aims, and one of them is around quality jobs and and kind of having well-being within the workforce. And in that, they're very much tying up, aren't they, Chris? They're tying up employment rights, health and safety, and employment law kind of together. And a good example of that, I think we talked on the podcast about the rights potentially around menopause.
Absolutely, and again, really significant, but maybe it's under the radar. They specifically mention women at work as a focus for wellbeing changes. And if we talk about something very specific in terms of the menopause, if you're a company that has over 250 employees, the proposals at the minute are that you will have to have what they're calling a menopause action plan. And the caveat to that is you've just got to have over 250 employees. So that is something that will, if everything goes to plan, will come into fruition. There will be lots of guidance on that. But again, that's a really significant and required change. But it's something that isn't in place at the moment.
And there's potentially more around that, because thinking about well-being will not just be about legal rights, it'll also be about harassment and not just safety from machinery, etc., but safety. So there's also there, isn't there? Lucy, I'm just looking through the questions that we've had.
So am I. Don't ask me any of them.
No, and we just have a few minutes left. I mean, one of the questions is, it's very unlikely that legislation will be able to be applied retrospectively.
Yes.
Isn't it? That never, am I right in that?
That's very unlikely.
Yeah,
I read that one. I thought, it's a good question. No,
very good question as well. Flexible working. Someone's mentioned that, because there are some proposed changes on that, aren't they? At the moment, you've got the right to request flexible working. That's going to be beefed up a bit. Is that right?
Yes, so the proposals in relation to flexible working are to really enhance the changes that are already in place. So from April this year, the Conservative government introduced the right to request as a day one right, but it's the right to request, and of course the employer can reject the request if there are reasonable grounds for doing so. What the Labour government are doing is really building on that, and what they're trying to do, they're trying to shift the emphasis to, rather than it being a right to request, kind of building flexibility as a default. So there will still be, as I understand it, an opportunity for an employer to say, no, we can't accommodate this request. But really the shift is, it will be the default, that it should be something that employers should accommodate. And I guess in terms of preparing for that, employers need to really understand what flexibility can be accommodated within their workforce. And it's going to be really important to kind of set out, if it can't be accommodated, to be really clear as to why that can't be the case, because very much the shift is for that to be a default.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this all comes back to that idea. They want quality jobs, don't they? They want more jobs, and they want them to be
quality, well-paid jobs. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and for people to have a decent time at work. So, I mean, I think the message coming through from you is, look at the specifics, start preparing, but also be very much thinking about, are you doing as well as you can be? Chris, Kat asks here, how will businesses be able to be involved in the consultation and also share their thoughts and ideas? So, I mean, at Make UK, I guess you're going to be very involved in talking to the government and responding. How will all of that work? How do members feed that in?
So in terms of EHS, that's a very, very specific process. So government and or the HSE issue a consultation paper. They issue it to people that are registered on their website. Clearly, it comes to Make UK. We push it out to all of our members. We'll advertise that it's happened as well, so that non-members can access it. But that is usually the consultation journey as such.
And Lucy, in terms of a lot of these things, because as I say, obviously people are kind of still, there'll be specific questions and there'll be specific points people want to make, and there will also be general points. How will that work in terms of responding to these proposals?
Yeah, so similar to Chris, the consultation process will be the government will issue the consultation document and seek views, and in the same way we'll reach out to our membership and ask them for comments, and we'll feed that back into government. But aligned to that is our policy team. You've heard from Seamus this morning already, and there'll be other members of the policy team later on after this session. Our policy department are very much working with, and have been working with, the Labour Party before the election for some time, getting to know the individuals who are making the decisions, trying to influence legislative policy. And so we'll be quite focused on what's happening. We will have regular meetings with our relevant officials to understand what the intention is, and then we'll provide the written response and seek to influence the development of the legislation to the advantage of our members generally. But there'll be quite a lot of work to do, so we'll value any input from members, any comments that will be gratefully received.
Absolutely, thank you. Because I mean, a couple of the other things that come up in questions and pre-questions, very specific for manufacturing, stuff about flexibility requests based on shift working as well, and things as well around seasonal demand, where there is specific seasonal demand and shift working in companies. There's loads more questions than we can get into answering. But as you were saying, Lucy, there is detail on the website, isn't there, that people can go to, and there will be the podcast. So that's Chris joins me on the podcast, and also Felicity staff, also from Make UK. So we talk about more of these issues on the podcast. You'll all be sent details of the podcast afterwards. Coming up, we've still got 2 more sections of this event. We're going to talk about training skills and the workforce of tomorrow, and then we're also going to talk about energy and this thing, CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. But first, Lucy and Chris, you are free to go. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for answering the specific questions that we've had. We'll all be back in a few minutes' time, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Hi everyone, welcome back in, or welcome if you're newly joined to this online event, and welcome back if you've been with us since the start. I know there's a number of people here who've been asking questions, which is fantastic. But as I say, welcome to new people. I'm Peg Alexander, host of this event. And for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be talking specifically about skills, apprentices, and the workforce of tomorrow, and the plans that the new Labour government has around this. Obviously, every time I've talked to anyone within Make UK, the whole question of skills and the workforce just comes right to the top. So I know we're going to have a really interesting 20 minutes or so. Let me introduce you to our 2 fab speakers who are going to talk us through this. We have Mark Farron first. Hi, Mark.
Afternoon or morning, Peg.
Morning. How are you doing? You all right?
Very well, thank you.
You are Make UK's Operations Director for Apprentices and Skills. Thanks for joining
Based in
us.
sunny Birmingham at the minute.
Yeah, is it sunny?
It is absolutely sunny in Birmingham, yeah, blue skies.
Oh, lucky you. I tell you what, it's not sunny in Leeds, but hey, I shall just be jealous from here. We also have Jamie Cater, Jamie, Senior Policy Manager. Jamie, you're the person who does all the policy on these issues.
Yeah, that's right. Morning, everyone. Morning, Peg. So I lead all of our policy work, government engagement on skills, employment, anything to the people workforce related. I'm talking to government on.
Yeah, so we're going to have a load to get through. We've already got one very good question. Oh, we've got quite a few questions on skills already as well. So I will try and bring those into the conversation. I know we're going to have loads more on skills, because this is just so key for Make UK members. So yesterday we had the Skills England bill announced. It's going to establish a body, Skills England. It's going to see the functioning of the skills systems in England. I know obviously there will be members in Scotland, Wales as well. This new body will work alongside what's part of the Industrial Strategy Council and Migration Advisory Committee. Jamie, was this what you were expecting? Is this what you were hoping for from the King's Speech?
Is it what we were expecting? Yes. Is it what we were hoping for? I think we're part way there. So we've known for a long time that setting up Skills England would be a priority for the new government. And I think there are three things really that I was encouraged to hear about what Skills England will look like. One is that it was described in the speech as having partnership with business at its heart, which I think is really encouraging. Means that we as Make UK and our member companies can hopefully be involved in the work that Skills England is going to do in terms of overseeing the skills system, designing some of those new qualifications, updating the apprenticeship levy into a growth and skills levy. Secondly, as you just referenced, Peg, it's going to work closely with both the Industrial Strategy Council and the Migration Advisory Committee. What that means is I think this government recognises that meeting skills demand is going to be absolutely essential to the success of any industrial strategy.
You've got a huge number of vacancies, haven't you, in this sector? Is it 61,000?
61,000 at the moment, yeah. So that's really critical. And with the Migration Advisory Committee bringing together the skills system and the immigration system, at the moment those two things work very separately, and what we've long called for is government to recognise that those two things inevitably are very closely related, and so immigration and skills need to work closely together. So that's really positive. And then finally, what we understand Skills England will do is to work to sort of coordinate things that happen locally, regionally and nationally, so that we strike the right balance between kind of skills policy at a national level and funding at a national level, with that local and regional flexibility that we have through local skills improvement plans and other things. So striking that right balance between something that is reflective of local labour market needs, the kind of local business environment, but avoiding this kind of patchwork across the country of different ways of doing things. So hopefully we'll get that balance through Skills England. So those are the three things that I'm really encouraged by. What we don't know yet is the detail about this new growth and skills levy, which will replace the apprenticeship levy. We know Skills England will be playing a big part in determining how that functions. And businesses, I'm sure on this call, will be as relieved as I am to finally hear a government say the words, "We will reform the apprenticeship levy." What we don't know yet is exactly how that is going to work and the time frame for doing that. But it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I asked you previously when we were talking to explain the skills levy to me, and it was just so complicated, isn't it? You must be so pleased that they've said they are going to reform it, even if we don't know the detail. What kind of reform do you want to see?
I guess I'll be pleased when I see the detail, Peg, absolutely. As you mentioned, and as we talked before, the levy was exceptionally complicated when it was first incepted, but it did get slightly easier to navigate, really. I guess certainly when we were chatting before, if there are going to be reforms, I think there needs to be a greater level of funding available. So I'm obviously talking from a training provider point of view, Peg, but it does seem that the levy's been stagnated for a while, so therefore in real terms it's actually dropped in terms of the level of funding available for companies to access and for training providers to access. So I'd like to see a greater level of funding, a greater level of support as well. We touched on previously around support for SMEs, so they've got to they don't have large learning development departments that can support the apprenticeship from a employer side. So I'd like to see some form of greater funding or greater flexibility to the funding that's targeted towards SMEs, and then maybe some flexibility around some of the upskilling piece that we talk about. So that's reskilling or upskilling of current staff as a way to promote staff through the ranks or through the gears, I like to say, in the engineering manufacturing world.
And look, one of the areas where, but what you both just said actually comes together is, did you call them local skills plans, Jamie?
Local skills improvement plans, yeah.
is that question there, isn't it? Because Mark, you were talking very specifically there about, you know, the needs of SMEs, the needs of small organisations, and knowing locally what they are and making sure the money and support is coming to them in the right way and for the right things. And Jamie, you were saying that a lot of that is going to go through these local skills plans. So how will people influence those? What's going to be the process for that?
Yeah, it's going to be, I think as Skills England sort of comes into being, this is going to be an evolving landscape. So the Local Skills Improvement Plans, LSIPs for short, my understanding is they will, if they're a Conservative government initiative, I expect them to stay in place under this government, but with more of that kind of oversight and coordination from Skills England. So again, it will be a balance between sort of being able to impact that on a local level, whether that's through combined authorities, mayoral authorities, your local council, or actually through central government. And Make UK is here to sort of support that either on a regional basis or centrally through myself and our policy team. There will be a number of ways of sort of navigating that evolving landscape.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Mark, we've got a question here from Sharon. It's not specifically for your area, because it's talking about the government saying they're wanting to recruit a load more teachers, but Sharon's raising the issue about reskilling people as well. So not just apprentices, but also making sure that the workforce we have got is reskilled for the jobs that manufacturing will need for tomorrow. And I guess that's where a lot of those tech skills come in and things like AI.
Yeah. I'd strongly recommend companies reaching out to their training providers, their colleges, their universities, to talk about the job roles that are needed for the future. And it may not be, an apprenticeship will plug those gaps in 3 or 4 years' time, but working with your training provider to identify what skills are needed in the short term. Are there members of staff that are perhaps in a different department or an operator within the business that can be upskilled and reskilled to a higher level to do that skill, and then looking at, okay, well, if we are going to do that, how is it structured? What support is there from the training provider and the employer? Will they be assigned a mentor? And as you said, Peg, what skills are current? And then one eye on what skills come in the future, and are they sustainable as well, really?
Absolutely, and that's where some of those other things that you mentioned as well will come in, and I guess as part of the consultation that you'll be pushing for and talking to Skills England or the other appropriate bodies in the other nations about some of those things about how long is the mentoring for, what level is the mentoring, and how long is the training for, some of those very specific questions there which need to be answered to make sure that we can properly reskill and upskill.
Yeah, but Peg, I think everyone wants a high quality, highly skilled apprentice program. I don't think everyone wants value for money and race to the bottom, and with that comes twofold, really. And I say I'm obviously going to be quite biased coming from a training provider angle in terms of, there should be a higher level of funds there to ensure that we've got the right kit and the right suitably trained staff to support any company. But also then on the other side, the employers have a responsibility, and it varies depending on perhaps the size of the company and the resource they have, that they need to have a structured placement in their business. So the apprentice or whichever trainee is going through the program, that they know where they're going, they know how they're going to get the skills and knowledge and behaviors that are needed for the future. They have a good mentoring system that's bought in so that they can provide that support for the apprentice or the trainee and understand how they're going to get the knowledge and skills for the future, and helping and supporting apprentices to build personal responsibility. So, how do they develop their problem solving skills? How do they understand how to manage a workload? These are softer skills that that companies perhaps need the support with when they support an apprenticeship program.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for that, Mark. And Jamie, given that 90% of manufacturers are SMEs, and we don't know where the skills levy is going to fall, do we? But previously under the old thing, they weren't required to pay the levy. Where is going to be the voice for people who are running SMEs to make arguments for whatever the new growth and skills levy will support, to make sure that it's there for the SMEs?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's very easy, I think, to kind of get wrapped up in all of these kind of debates about the the apprenticeship levy, the new growth and skills levy, about sort of what happens to levy payers, and actually a majority of businesses are not levy payers. So we've seen some positive, if limited, changes under the previous government in terms of support for SMEs. What we'll really need to see from Skills England is a guarantee that the flexibility that levy payers want from the new growth and skills levy isn't going to limit the amount of funding that is available for SME apprenticeships. I think that's really important. And secondly, just that the system overall, so not just the funding mechanism, but the apprenticeship system as a whole, works well for SMEs, which often it hasn't in the past. Often it's very complicated, very heavy on sort of the administrative burden. At the very start of this new system, they were excluded from bits of the digital system for a couple of years. So it's not just the kind of the levy as a way of funding apprenticeships, it's how all of the kind of architecture around it kind of works, and too often it hasn't for SMEs. So it needs to be a much clearer, much simpler, and much more tailored process for SMEs to engage with.
And obviously at national level, you're going to be making that case very, very strong policy wise. You'll also be making the case for Skills England to make sure that that goes down to local level and those local plans. Mark, if if somebody's listening and they say, right, when Skills England comes about, when we know more about it, how do you want to hear what Make UK members are saying, so that you can feed that into the discussions that happen at national level?
The feedback can come through the policy team, Peg. A lot of our members use the technology hub based in Birmingham to train their apprentices, and we hold regular forums and feedback sessions, so they can feed back through our business team or our TDAs. We certainly need all stakeholders, so that's employers, that's apprentices or former apprentices as well, and other colleges, universities, other training providers, to have their views. We've all got the same wants and needs, really.
Make the contacts, I think, and open your doors in September, Mark. That's another message, isn't it?
26th of September, Peg, National Manufacturing Day. So absolutely encourage all engineering manufacturing members, the whole community, to open their doors, showcase what they can, the good stuff that they do day in, day out, and try and inspire some of the youngsters and other people to get involved and get into engineering manufacturing. Yeah, big day for STEM that day.
Big day. So there's still so much of this still to be worked out, but what everybody does know is how essential this is, and I think the message is feed the information through. You'll be doing what you can nationally as well, but people need to be preparing for those more local or sub-regional conversations as well, to make sure that the local plans meet your needs. So Mark and Jamie, thank you so much for joining us for this part of the Road Ahead event. We're going to have another quick break. You've just got a few minutes. Go and get yourself another quick cuppa, go to the toilet, whatever it is you need to do, because when we come back, we're going to be talking about energy and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So yeah, we'll see you back in a few minutes. Jamie and Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
So, hello everyone. Those of you that have been with us since 11 o'clock, well done. Congratulations on having made it through. If you're just joining us for this Road Ahead event, welcome to you all. We're now at the last of our discussions that we're having this morning. If you're new, I'm Peg Alexander. I've been hosting the Road Ahead podcast and these events. This is the last of our events. We're going to be talking now for the next 20 minutes about energy trends and CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. I'm very, very pleased. We've got two experts with us this morning to try and unpick this, explain it all to us. First, we have Brigitte Amoruso. Hi, Brigitte.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Peg. Thank you.
Hello. So you are Make UK Senior Energy and Climate Change Specialist.
Yes, that's right. I'm in the policy team. Yes.
Great to have you. We've also got Frank Askov. Have I pronounced your name correctly, Frank? I didn't get a chance to check earlier.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yes.
Yeah. So you're the Energy and Climate Change Policy Manager.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah. In the same team with Brigitte?
So I actually sit within UK Steel, which is part of Make UK. Obviously, as steel is very electro and energy intensive. That is a key focus area for our members.
Absolutely, really, really important. So let's get going. We're just going to see, we may well get some questions that come through for us, but we're going to start off with what we had in the King's speech yesterday. Right at the heart of this is this Great British Energy. Somebody said in a pre-question, Great British Energy sounds significant. So I'm not sure which one of you to go to on this one, but does one of you want to take this? The proposals we had about Great British Energy, it's expected to use state funds to co-invest in renewable and nuclear energy projects. What are the implications of this? Is this significant for the manufacturing sector?
So I'm now happy to jump in here and perhaps
Brilliant. Thanks, Frank.
can join in and see if probably I'll miss something that she will catch. So I think kind of both yes and no. So Great British Energy, the details we have so far broadly are focusing on three tasks for this new government kind of owned company. One is kind of funding local renewable projects in local authorities if they have kind of local projects they would like to go fund with. So government will provide loans or kind of financing through Great British Energy. It's also expected to go in and invest in let's call less mature renewables. That is your tidal, maybe floating offshore wind, and finally it also is intending to eventually kind of rival the EDF and the Denmark's Ørsted, where it's a state-owned company that operates and develops kind of generational energy. However, the impact on manufacturers will probably not be immediate. It will be something we would expect in 5-7 years' time when these kind of structural investments have come to fruition. So it's a bit tricky. There's definitely a gap in the market, and that's why the government is introducing this, but less kind of direct impact and benefits for manufacturer here now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Make UK has kind of said early clarity on the mission and its structure is going to be essential to attract that investment. And like so many other things, they're saying they want private sector investment into this, that this isn't just about public money going to support it. They want industry and business in alongside it. Obviously, Great British Energy, a big part of their plans to achieve clean power by 2030, heading towards net zero as well by 2050. I think that's right, isn't it, Brigitte?
Yes, correct. And it's a very ambitious target. So let's see if it is feasible, but they do seem to really, have upped all the targets for wind, solar, and so on, all the renewable energy. So let's see. Yes, I think I have nothing really much to add to what Frank said. Yes,
They are, as I say, they are very, very ambitious targets. Is there anything else that we know either from the King's Speech or that we knew from the manifesto about how else they're going to achieve those targets, or what their expectations are going to be of industry in terms of working towards them?
I think they want to, also use the National Wealth Fund to support a number of industries there. So they've mentioned steel, of course. So that's a fund of 7.3 billion. So they want to also upgrade the ports and build supply chains. Also, build new EV gigafactories. Deploy CCUS and support the manufacturing of green hydrogen, which is all very good. I think one thing that we have to be careful about as well, for example, is not to necessarily focus on just some sectors. They also want to, I forgot the aerospace. They're supporting the SAFs as well for aerospace.
What are
SAF? Sustainable aviation fuels. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's quite typical, isn't it, of their response of the kind of Labour Party approach, is that it's quite a sectoral approach, isn't it?
Yes.
Not just on this issue, but across in terms of the industrial strategy, that they're looking at specific sectors and saying this is what we need, and these are the ones that we're prioritizing.
Yes, and that is a little bit of a danger in a way, because, for example, gigafactories, it's all very good to build EVs, but if they also want to have their supply chains, and we all do, domestically, rather than them leaving the UK. So they could put more emphasis on the midstream activities, for example, for EVs, not just the gigafactories for batteries, but also the manufacturing of cathodes, components of that. Yeah. So to really establish those supply chains.
Mm-hmm. And Frank, I mean, you said you were in the steel policy team, and what specifically have we heard, or are there big gaps? What are you thinking specifically for the steel industry?
So I think kind of coming back to the question of energy and kind of this expansion of it, it's really about kind of not only is the new government desperately trying to rush towards a more ambitious target to deliver a decarbonized power grid by 2030, it's also kind of, can we get those benefits from the increased deployment of renewables? At the moment, a lot of the wind turbines are manufactured abroad. The previous government was more keen on getting the renewables and less focused on actually making sure the supply chains and manufacturing kind of jobs were in the UK. And I think we would see from this new government that with the increased deployment of renewables, there will be increased requirement of local content as well, having the supply chains locally rather than just depending on them being in Europe or even in the Far East, especially kind of after COVID and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've seen kind of an increased appetite and understanding of local supply chains, and kind of how in terms of security and geopolitics, that it is actually quite crucial that we can't just decarbonize through foreign investments and foreign supply chains. We do actually have the jobs and benefits here, and I think that's particularly encouraging for steel, in terms of, obviously, we want to provide some of the steel for the offshore wind, for the solar panels, kind of the mount for them, but also for wider manufacturers, kind of as they start providing components for all the renewable generation, etc. So very, very kind of supportive of this. But as always, as Brigitte was talking about, when you have industrial strategy, there's always a risk that you pick the wrong winner, and everyone rushing towards saving the same industry, saving the same thing. But that's an inherent kind of issue that all kind of modern economies are now facing, and the same thing in the US, where they have picked loads of winners as well. Are they the right winners? Ultimately, that time will tell.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting, isn't it, Brigitte? This is part of an energy independence bill. So that vision is set out very much from the start of kind of much more control of things here, I think, when it comes to energy and power.
Yes, and I mean, there's also the big elephant in the room, really, is the decoupling of the. I think this is all part of decoupling the electricity price from the gas wholesale price. There's something has to be done for that. So obviously, producing more renewable energy will help a little bit with that, but not really. So something has to be done, and also. The electricity price has to go down, because if at the moment electrification is really the only thing, and energy efficiency that manufacturers have at hand, and until the end of the decade, really, to achieve or move forward on their net zero goals. And for that, you really need to get lower prices of electricity. If gas is if electricity price is going to be higher, there won't be the incentive to switch.
Yeah. Before we move on to some questions that we've got here, let's just talk about CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. I don't know which one of you wants to just explain it very, very simply in a few seconds.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to jump in again. So, in short, a CBAM is a border policy. It's meant to provide a level playing field between domestic producers and imported products on carbon pricing alone. So, at the moment, domestic producers of certain goods pay per ton of carbon that they emit as part of their production. The problem obviously arises when imported products have not faced the same carbon price, and that means that they have an unlevel playing field, and you've kind of trying to reduce domestic production, but really what you have also achieved with that is kind of effectively reduce domestic production and increase the import of high emission products. A CBAM goes in to try to correct that, provides a similar equivalent carbon price at the border for products that have not already faced a carbon price, and therefore kind of making sure that both domestic products and kind of imported products have a similar playing field. That obviously means for manufacturers in the UK, if you are importing certain components from around the world that have not faced carbon pricing already, you will likely face for the goods that apply, typically steel, aluminium, etc. Then you will likely face a cost at the border when you import those, compared to if you buy them from a UK or an EU producer.
Because of course the Labour manifesto said they want to have a UK CBAM to sit alongside the EU one.
Yeah, indeed, and kind of like the Conservative government before that had already consulted twice on a CBAM, had also committed to it, so it seemed quite certain that we were going to have a similar policy in both in the UK and in the EU. They very much follow the same principles of how to implement a CBAM. So, but what we would like to see from it is a clear mutual recognition, linking up the carbon scheme, so that kind of any barriers of trade between the EU and the UK on carbon and the CBAM disappears. Because the EU is our biggest and closest trading partner, and the EU CBAM could potentially prove to be a barrier to trade for certain industrial products, and obviously we'd like to see that.
So there is a question here: what sector/stroke products does CBAM apply to?
Good question. Let me just quickly look that up, because it is actually, funnily enough,
It's different.
it is different in both the EU and the UK.
So there's aluminium, steel, what else? Electricity, I believe. We need to look it up. Sorry.
So just bear with me a moment, and I will find the right answer to that question.
Cement. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have in the UK one, they're planning to have aluminium, cement, ceramics, fertilizers, glass, hydrogen, and iron and steel.
Yeah.
And just bearing in mind that in the EU, you do not have glass, and you do not have ceramics. but you have electricity as part of the EU CBAM. So those are the key kind of differences. But those are the raw industrial products that will, if you import them into the UK from a place that has not faced carbon price already, that would likely face a kind of border cost from 2027 onwards when that is introduced.
Well, there is help for Make UK members, isn't there, to be able to help to work out exactly what the carbon contribution is and work out what that means. And the podcast that people will get afterwards, we talk a bit more about that help that is available. Brigitte, you answered the question that somebody had asked about if GB Energy is going to be a facilitator or produce its own energy. Thanks for that. You said it's intended to become a producer as well as dealing with operations and management. So we've got that there. We've got another question here as well. I don't know which one of you wants to take this. Are there specific details about energy efficiency and refurbishing our building stock? This tends to be much quicker and ROI and avoids the planning issues of new energy sources.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't seen much, to be honest. So, and also it was missing a little bit in the housing King's speech when they spoke about building houses and other things as well. Nothing was mentioned about insulation or existing buildings or even new ones. So I'm not exactly sure. So, but completely agree. Energy efficiency and electrification are the two things at the moment that, you know, most companies can do, manufacturing companies.
Yeah, and then I'm sure lots of people will be feeding that into the consultation around housing when that comes out as well. I mean, on that, Frank, then, were there other things missing yesterday or missing so far that you were hoping to see?
I would say not really. I think kind of like we have to be mindful of what our King's speech is and the time that they had. Like it was Labour government that came in 2 weeks before. Obviously, they are rushing to get as much in as possible there, but there are also limitations of how many things they have prepared. I think we were happy with what we saw, but like we know that this is basically the start of a whole package of policies. So obviously we want to see more measures on energy. In particular, we want to see more measures on CBAM, kind of confirmation on that. But again, it's kind of like it's not. It doesn't all have to be in the King's speech. Government can do additional work outside that.
Yeah, and Brigitte, because one of the things I know Make UK said, you know, is that it'd be great to see additional focus as part of the energy independence bill on technologies that are currently and immediately available, like onshore wind, solar, before considering others like hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, which may be a bit further down the line.
Yeah, I think, I mean, they're not going to have much capital, right, to start with. So, you know, these are probably the easier wins or, you know, easiest things to do. So that's really why. But clearly CCUS and hydrogen, green hydrogen are important. So they should be included as well, of course. But yeah, just as a start.
Yeah,
I don't know if my colleague Frank agrees with that.
Yeah, and I guess one of the other messages that you will be saying to government over this consultation period and over the next time is, you know, work with us, work in partnership with us to work out the detail on these things.
Absolutely. And one other thing, so in terms of technology, I suppose digitalization and making the grid smart, and then so that grid connection and, you know, and upgrading it, of course, as quickly as possible so that the connections, you know, can be available to manufacturers so that these leading times of 10 years are you know, don't happen. That is absolutely crucial, and AI and digitalization is going to be really important with, you know, behind the meter assets, metering and that kind of thing to enhance flexibility and access to demand response services.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you both so much, Frank Askov and Bridget Amoruso. Thank you so much for joining us here. We now come to the end naturally of this event. So can I thank all the speakers that have joined us over the last hour and a half, isn't it? All the speakers who've joined us for all the valuable insights. And following the session, we're going to be sending attendees a link to the recently recorded Road Ahead podcast, where I sat down with most of the people, not everybody. We didn't speak, Frank, did we? But most of the people who have been part of this event, I sat down with them and we talked in detail again about these issues on here. So if I can just say thank you very much to everyone who's taken part. Thank you for all your questions as well, and for all the comments. And sorry we couldn't get to everything. Good luck, everybody, with your road ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you.